So, a big lie is a propaganda technique that Adolf Hitler used. It's about the use of a lie so colossal that no one would believe that someone could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. This is not a new social engineering concept. Others are quite aware and have used the expression. For example, this gentleman: if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and military consequences of the lie. It is thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its power to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So the primary rules were never allow the public to cool off, never admit a fault or a wrong, never concede that there may be some kind of good in your enemy, never leave room for alternatives, never accept blame, concentrate on one enemy at a time and blame him for everything that goes wrong. People will believe a big lie sooner than a little one, and if you repeat it frequently enough, people will sooner than later believe it. Phase 1. Make people fear animal fat. And this is why. Early on in the 1900s, Procter & Gamble, a soap company, were using cottonseed to produce soap. They were using that kind of fat in soap. They had leftover cottonseed oil. Any good business wants to optimize and not really waste anything. They probably had to pay to get rid of this stuff, so they had to find a use for it. So initially, the cottonseed oil was used as a industrial lubricant. However, with further technology and the ability to refine oils, the technology was at a point where they figured, why don't we just feed this fat as a dietary fat? From there, Crisco gained popularity. There was some more social engineering occurring there. Cookbook was marketed and aimed towards mothers, giving them trying to sell the image that Crisco is clean, it's done in a lab, it's awesome because it's vegetables, when in reality we're talking about seeds. They're not even vegetables. And again, the use of vegetable oil was coined, and that again was also marketing, because they're not vegetables. We could say corn oil is the exception. Most of these are seed oils. The ones that are an actual plant, a fruit, for example, coconut, avocado, and olive, these ones are naturally oily plants and need to be cold pressed. Therefore, they don't require the refinement process that these other seed oils require, that are not naturally oily, that require solvents to be put into the mix to extract from the seeds these resins that are also pushed out of the seed, not only with the solvents, but under pressure and heat. They don't look like naturally occurring olive oil or cold press oils. They further have to be refined to look like the real deal. So they further refine it, deodorize it, process it, evaporate it, all to come to this consistency that looks very clear, nice, looking exactly like olive oil, and marketed as being healthier. Even though there's evidence that these seed oils, there's no real evidence that they're healthy, that they're heart healthy. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence indicating that they're very harmful. These seeds became subsidized. The government wanted to grow more of these seed crops, the soybeans, the sunflower, the canola, which is a rapeseed. So they started subsidizing that. And they also wanted to also put these things in products. So in between the 1900s, when these seed oils became initiated and put into the human food consumption for the first time ever, we started to become sick. Also, the wide adoption of cigarette smoking between the 1900s during the World War, etc., leading up into the 50s, was also a new thing that people were doing very much. So we basically started to eat these man-made, fabricated, unnatural, highly toxic, highly mutated, highly oxidized, and way too high in omega-6. These poisonous seed oils started to be used. Now, at this point, there was no demonization like we have right now with animal fat, saturated fat, etc. In fact, the majority of our fats prior to this Crisco revolution was primarily through animal sources of nutrition. Each kind of animal source of nutrition has a certain ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Beef is close to 4 to 1. Pork is 16 to 1 or 14 to 1, I believe. And it's okay to have a little bit more omega-6 than 3. But when this ratio comes out of whack, which did occur when we started to industry started to use these Crisco oils and these seed oils, aka vegetable oils, in everything, we started to see this entering more and more. This was causing oxidative stress. This was leading to chronic inflammation, etc. Heart disease was on the rise to a certain extent because of that. And now we got the smoking that was added. But it was really when Ansel Keys came in with a crap cherry-picked study that was a food questionnaire, that was an observational epidemiological bullshit study that they use, and then again, as a social engineering tactic, they go put this in social media, in newspapers back in the day, saying that saturated fat seems to be associated with heart disease, meaning higher intake of fat in countries with high intake of fat. Well, there's higher heart disease, therefore that's the cause. So it doesn't matter if they're using words like associated. The social engineering, the manipulative aspect is that the population will interpret that as, oh, when you're eating animal fat, especially the saturated fat, it's going to block your heart. It wasn't bound on any science. In fact, even there's no association, even screw the cause, there's no association with saturated fat and heart disease. In fact, higher saturated fat consumption is associated with longevity. All right, so we see that there was economic motivations for starting to introduce Crisco and starting to paint it in a favorable light. So Ansel Keys had the correlation between saturated fat or fat consumption in countries and their heart attack rates. He had 22 countries. They didn't make any linear relationship. So his hypothesis wasn't confirmed with that study. So what did he do? He looked at 7 countries that formed a linear relationship, only used those 7 to give a linear relationship, looked like it correlated very well, used that associative study, and that was when the animal fat was demonized. Automatically, if the recommendations now, based on this crap cherry-picked, manipulated study, says that, okay, well, it's the animal fat that's causing heart disease. Well, they took out the animal fat. They reduced it, and it just, by coincidence, worked really well for the seed oil companies, because now everything became seed oils. The lard was replaced with Crisco. The butter was replaced with margarine. The seed oils were made a lot cheaper because they were subsidized. So they were a lot cheaper, 3 times cheaper at the moment than olive oils. Therefore, everything worked to their benefit. When you look at the economy, when you look at big business and the politics, when politics and big business during this era started to really become closer and tied, and eventually sleeping in the same kind of bed. Analogy can be used. So the demonization of animal fats the purpose of that, the economic purpose behind the social engineering, behind the demonization of fat towards the public, this big lie started. The big lie that animal nutrition is going to cause every single possible problem that we have, from the environmental problems to our heart problems. And now they're starting to put doubt about the animal protein, that it's going to cause cancer, specifically the attack on red meat first, that red meat will cause bum cancer, with shit evidence, absolutely no foundation to be making those kind of claims. Yet, let's just develop a nice food questionnaire. Let's, punch into the database correlations that could look negative, and let's just ride with it. Because now they're also using this big lie to manipulate the masses, to demonize and put doubt about animal source nutrition, to give shit documentaries, and to give a platform to vegans to spread misinformation, all with an agenda. Now, don't forget that when they took out the fat, the animal fat out of foods, and started to use the seed oils that they were making money now with on us, there was the second industry that also has to grow. So that was the sugar industry. So by 1950, we weren't having an obesity or a diabetes or any of the metabolic epidemics that we had. We had basically heart disease starting to rise, which was caused by the seed oils and the smoking. But they went after something we've been consuming since the dawn of man, animal nutrition. So it worked out great again for the industry. So now they are supporting, using shit science, okay, and social engineering in the media. They've been able to have their seed oils. They set themselves up, now that they demonize the fat. They have the seed oils supported, because the little fat that they will allow us to have now is the seed oils. Thank goodness that those are healthy. It must be just a coincidence. They're making money with the sugar industry, because now they have to replace all that fat with sugar. So all of their industries are supported based on our health. So our health is crumbling, but all of the industries that they are supporting that are actually unnatural, that have never really been used within human cultures to thrive, all of a sudden these things are miraculously beneficial for our health. Things as ancient as red meat, animal fat, animal protein, and all of the nutrition that we have thrived on, that our whole ancestral past is based on. All of a sudden, these things are probably the things that are freaking killing us. These are the causes of modern disease, ancient foods. But the modern foods that we have made have no influence. It's just a coincidence? I don't think so. All right, so let me get to the point. I think that this social engineering tactic, a big lie, has been performed on us nutritionally. I think that optimal food for humans are animal foods. There's specifically essential vitamins that are not found in the plant kingdom. There are essential omega-3, DHA, and EPA that is barely found in the plant kingdom. Besides algae, there's the B12 that we often hear with vegans. There's also vitamin A deficiencies. There's zinc, there's iron, all this, but they keep on repeating over and over keywords: healthy, whole, and green. When you see green, it's associated with health. When you hear about healthy whole grains, but there's really nothing healthy about it, and they're devoid of nutrients, and they usually need to be fortified, but it doesn't matter. Just keep on repeating the lie and make it so big and over a couple of generations that just gradually people become desensitized. It took a long time, okay, to say that fruits and vegetables are required in a healthy diet. It helps feed the agricultural industry. We receive fruits and vegetables from all across the world. It's unnatural, and it's also using fossil fuels to get this food all around the world. Previous generations hearing the animal food, such as the animal fat, such as now the animal protein, the idea that this is a danger to our health would have been completely ridiculous. You would sound like the dumbest person on earth. Yet, during my generation, I never doubted that fat caused heart disease or cholesterol. I had faith in scientism. I had faith in the scientists. I had faith in humanity, that humanity's best interest is always being looked out. How can we get healthier? How can we be more optimal? But I'm starting to believe that that is a crock of shit, that it's all about people in high up places controlling everything. And the best way to control humanity is through nutrition. If you are not getting the essential animal fats and cholesterol, your cognition will decline. Neurodegenerative diseases will occur later in your life. Depressions, mental illnesses, mothers that are depleted of essential animal fats, creating new children, okay, but the brain is 60% fat, is full of cholesterol. So if a mother is fat phobic and cholesterol phobic, they're literally producing a new life, a new brain with inappropriate kinds of fat, because the fat that will make us optimal and thrive has been demonized for a very deceptive agenda that is based on control of the population to dumb them down, to create modern diseases. So we're too sick to even realize that all around us, big business and deceptive people are setting us up into a slave system with slave food, with no more privacy, okay, and propaganda everywhere. People do not take the time to even read articles anymore. They'll just look at the headlines and boom, it's ingrained in their brain. They believe it. All right, so again, looking at what was read at the start, if you tell a lie big enough and you just keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. This has been done, okay? Animal fat causes heart disease. It clogs your heart. This is untrue, yet it is still now a current myth that will keep on being propagated. They know that even if they keep on saying something that is actually inaccurate, people will believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time that the state shields the people from the political, economic, and military consequences of the lie. And this, guys, is exactly what the big business, the government, and whatnot are doing. They are giving us a whole propaganda on the media. They're giving us food surveys, making statistics sound bad, the environment also. So basically, they want to blame everything on animal nutrition because it's not as lucrative, and they want to convince us to start eating what is subsidized, what they can make a fortune on, what is dirt cheap. Basically, let's cut out the middleman, the animal, and let's just feed the human the animal food. Okay, let's bring human rights, okay, to the level of animal. Okay, let's bring it down to the level of animal, and let's raise animals to have human rights. Okay, to the point eventually where an animal and a human are of the same value. And once that's done, then we literally will be eating a cow diet, okay, grazing continually because it's not nutritious and we're hungry and the sugar is addictive. Okay, we will be herded into smart cities, okay, eating GMO, subsidized, and processed food by the 10 big companies. we will slowly become stupider and stupider. The generations after generations will become also dumbed down. Hormonal deficiencies from the plastics that are being used. We used to use glass. Now we're using plastics that seeps estrogen like hormones. The next generation is being built by humans, by parents that are deficient nutritionally. The recommended daily allowance, okay, is not based on science either. It's just to prevent deficiencies. It has no clue what levels are optimal, okay? So this, again, is a social engineering technique. Repeat it often and just make it big. The biggest lie is that animal foods, literally the food that humans require, or else we will be sick and depleted. We have convinced ourselves, okay, well, we have been convinced that this is toxic, and we are now asking the government to take away good food and to offer us shit food. We have literally been socially engineered to ask for shit that is not good for us, to tax animal foods so that it is expensive as shit to get appropriate nutrition, that you'll be going more with McCain pizza pockets and whatnot. These things will be dirt cheap, while animal nutrition will be taxed. So, this is for now. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so check this out. His primary rule, okay, never allow the public to cool off, okay? Look at the crisis. Have we ever not been in a crisis? When I was young, I remember it was acid rain. It was the hole in the ozone. Now it's CO2. Now it's greenhouse gases. Now it's resource scarcity. Okay, so the primary rule is always keep people in a state of panic. I'm not saying that humans don't have a negative influence, that we haven't been, that we have not been responsible with the way that we're functioning with resources and energy and nutrition and whatnot. There's definitely a consequence, but they're going to create such a large crisis that literally our survival is on the line. By doing that, okay, opinion doesn't matter anymore, because now martial law can be implemented. Now, because we have no choice, it's not the choice of the public. Okay, you're too stupid as the public to know what's going on. You have to trust these people, these professionals, these scientists. They'll take care of you. They'll fix everything. Okay, and Greta will have a future. So we know that the science that Ansel Keys did that led to the demonization of our traditional animal fats, this allowed a drastic reduction. They convinced us that we have to reduce the animal fat, the lard and stuff like that that used to be in pies and stuff like that. So they convinced us that the animal stuff is bad. Thank goodness they found seed oils that happen to be heart healthy, which I just showed you the report that it's linked possibly. And I'm very convinced about this hypothesis that it is the omega-6 in the seed oils, as well as the rancidity and the oxidation, the oxidized state of the oil that's causing the heart disease. So the American Heart Association adopted Ansel Keys' false idea about saturated fats clogging up your heart. However, they will never concede that they're wrong. They'll never admit that, oh guys, we jumped to conclusions, we've been wrong for the last century, sorry, we made you very, very sick. 2 generations are paying for it. Also, never concede that there may be any good in your enemy. Okay, so the cows are farting, they're causing CO2, they are the sole cause. The cow rectums are killing us. Death by cow ass. That's basically what they're saying. So the cows, what they're farting is bad. They're taking up land, which is not true. There is a certain amount of land on Earth that is good for plant agriculture, and there's some areas that plant agriculture, like in Ecuador, for example, is very difficult. Therefore, the terrain is adopted for animal, livestock, and whatnot. So don't take the ruminant animals that are supposed to be outside. Don't screw up nature's perfect ecological cycle. Put them in to warehouses, feed them a food that is foreign, okay? And then after say, look, they're taking our resources. Cows are supposed to eat grass. Grass is not a resource that we are competing with them for. We can't do anything. But these cows, these ruminant animals, magically take this cellulose that we have no use for and produce all the vitamins we need, all the fats we need, and all the proteins we need in the most bioavailable and nutritious form. I mean, just blatant comments like cow farts, for example. Cows are not hind gut fermenters. They do the fermentation process quite early on in the digestive tract, and they burp methane. So it's not actually cow farts. It technically would be cow burps. Don't forget that all organic matter produces some kind of gas as it's rotting anyways. Don't forget that it's not the cow's fault that we're cutting down all the trees that usually sequester the CO2, take CO2 out of the air and put it back into the plant and back into the soil. Okay, that tilling the soil annually, okay, for monocrops destroys the topsoil. So all of these statistics, just like what the ruse is to don't ever say that your enemy has any good in them. Don't talk about the necessity of animal agriculture to feed the world, that it's impossible to feed the world only with plants. Don't tell the people about the actual resources that these animals are taking, because they're being fed grain, the cows. About 9% of what we're feeding those cows technically could be human consumable grains and whatnot. The rest is leftover that is unedible for humans, that is being fed to the animals. So we have 51% of all greenhouse emissions caused by cow ass, and we have the reality that the whole agricultural industry, including plants, is closer to 9%. 5% of that 9 is plant agriculture, and 4%. So even plant agriculture produces more. Don't forget that these vegans and whatnot are receiving unnaturally mangoes and coconuts all over the world, where we were not able to do that prior. It's not a natural thing. It's not a natural part of the way we were living to receive foods from all around the world that are using transportation. Yet we are being convinced that it's animal farts, when in reality it's like, come on guys, we see the industry. We see the planes flying everywhere. We see the boats. And yet, they know that through social engineering, they can just repeat it over and over. People will believe it. See, and never leave room for alternatives. Don't talk about a massive reforestation globally that's very simple. Let's all plant more trees, let's reforest globally. No, what they're going to do is they're going to make a new technology that sucks CO2 out of the air and pushes it back into these chambers underground. And then they can tax us for our CO2 instead of just planting some fucking trees. So obviously it's not industry's fault. It's not monocropping's fault that is depleting the soil. Monocropping is quite unnatural. Cutting down all of the biodiversity of an area to plant one type of crop that is an annual does not create a supportive matrix for the topsoil. You're continually just depleting, planting, depleting, planting, depleting. You're not closing the loop with the ruminant animals. So instead of other alternatives like returning to more nature-based blueprints for the way that we're going to do agriculture, no, forget about that alternative. Let's just totally ban a very important nutritional source of food, animals. Don't accept blame. Of course they're not going to accept blame. It's your fault. It's overpopulation. It's because you're breathing. So if you reread The Big Lie, the purpose for it, the way it's followed through, you'll see that this has occurred among for other areas within society, but focusing on nutrition, we see that they have repeated a lie. Plant-based, 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 whole food, whole food, whole food, fiber, 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 saturated fat is bad, cholesterol is bad. And we've just heard this going now into the second generation. It's all a bunch of lies. It's manipulation. And I'll just finish now here with a couple of the studies that maybe, something that you can ponder and wonder, are you comfortable with these kind of studies? What are the purposes of these studies? They're looking at food and our behavior. Okay, that's manipulation.